Hi, this is Sam Spagnola at the Spagnola Law Firm here in Greensboro, North Carolina. I'm going to spend just a few minutes with you right now to talk about the requirements for obtaining a divorce in North Carolina. Now, this is going to be a pretty short video because actually the requirements for getting divorced in North Carolina are pretty simple. So let's get right into it. The first requirement in North Carolina is you or your spouse have to have been a resident of North Carolina for at least 6 months before you file. If you have not lived here for at least 6 months before you file, or your spouse has not lived here for at least 6 months before you file, you can't file for divorce in North Carolina. And when I mean 6 months before you file, it means you have to live here for the actual 6 months immediately preceding filing your complaint. So if you lived here for 6 months and then moved away a month ago and then you want to file tomorrow, that's not going to work because you have not been a resident for 6 months immediately preceding the filing of the divorce. Same thing would be for your spouse. Again, it's not a requirement that you both live here, but at least one of you has to have lived in North Carolina for at least 6 months immediately before you file the complaint, and that's 6 months in a row. So that's the first requirement. The second requirement is that you have lived separate and apart from your spouse with the intent to remain separate for at least 1 year. And what does that mean? It means living above the garage doesn't count. Living in the basement doesn't count. Living in staying in separate bedrooms does not count. You have to actually live in a separate residence for at least 1 year before you can file for your divorce in North Carolina. You have to have the intent that that separation be permanent. You may be in a situation where you and your spouse have lived in separate places by choice or by necessity. For example, you might have a spouse who's in the military and is stationed overseas or has a job somewhere else, and you live here or they live here and you live somewhere else. Well, that's living separate and apart, but you also have to establish in a situation such as that separation, at some point during that separation, there was intent that the parties remained separate permanently. So there are no grounds for divorce in North Carolina other than that. You have to be a resident for 6 months before you file, and you have to have lived separate and apart for at least a year before you file. Marital misconduct does not matter. There's no abandonment or any bad behavior or anything else you have to show to get divorced in North Carolina. It's not a fault state, so it doesn't matter whose fault it is or why you're getting a divorce. The only question is, have you lived here for 6 months before you filed, or have they lived here 6 months before you filed, and have you been living separate and apart for at least a year? That's it. You don't have to have a separation agreement or other document that says we're separated in order to file for divorce in North Carolina. All you have to do is wait for that year to end of separation and file your complaint and state that you live separate and apart for a year. Now, you may want a separation agreement of some kind in writing if there's a dispute later on about whether you have in fact been separated for a year and you had an agreement that states in it, hey, we separated on such and such date. That would be certainly evidence to refute the argument that you weren't separated for a year. But other than that, as long as you state that in your complaint and the other person does not complain or object to it and say, wait, we haven't been separated for a year, that's all the proof the court needs is your sworn statement. So it's a lot easier than some people might think. As far as that goes, you don't really need any signed document. There's no, quote, papers the other person needs to sign other than being served with the complaint in order to proceed with the divorce. So that's the overview for divorce in North Carolina, at least what the requirements are to obtain a divorce from your spouse in this state. I hope it's helpful. I'm Sam Spagnola with the Spagnola Law Firm here in Greensboro, North Carolina. We serve clients here in Guilford County, Alamance County, Randolph County, Rockingham County, and Davidson County. And if we can be of any service to you, we'd appreciate your business. You can give us a call at 336-373-8469. Again, the number is 336-373-8469. Thank you.